Chapter 25 Feminine Affairs. Up on the hill, alongside our house, lived a regimental paymaster who soon became very friendly with my mother. They both loved anything to do with food and spent a great deal of their time exchanging recipes or sending succulent dishes to each other, all of which my grandmother viewed with the gravest suspicions. He was a strange, odd person, living an eccentric, lonely life in his big house on the hill with only his Batman to look after him. He did all his cooking himself. He devoted hours to this. Sometimes I would drop in on a winter's evening to find a couple of stray guests lounging in the salon. Officers perhaps merely passing through a skeeshy here and wanting a bed for the night. And since he was noted for keeping open house, they naturally and automatically made for his home. More often than not, he would himself be in the kitchen, a large apron enveloping him, and his short-sighted eyes peering anxiously into whatever savoury dishes he was concocting by way of a surprise for his guests. Sometimes he would let me stay in the kitchen, but at other times he would send me away from him, telling me that tonight's dish was a secret, that I must not see what he was doing, since I might tell my mother, and he did not want her stealing his recipes before he was ready to part with them. I would take the stairs to the salon to stretch unmolested on a divan until a shout from below would tell me that the meal was ready. There was a very ornate rococo dining room opening off the salon, and sometimes he would have dinner served here when he wanted to show off, but dinner in the tasteless dining room was a sombre affair. And he would not let us forget our politeness, chiding us severely if a drop of wine was spilled over his elaborate tablecloth, losing his familiar identity as our contemporary, becoming the paymaster, a senior officer. We liked it best when he allowed us to eat in the unrefined atmosphere of the kitchen. Perhaps there would be a half a dozen of us or so, and we would squat ungracefully over the huge open fire while he roasted slowly a whole lamb, cutting strips for us as they cooked. His Batman would place glasses and racquet on the bare wooden table, and oil lamps would glow kindly, for there was no electricity in the kitchen. The lamb finished, he would produce stuffed tomatoes or some such delicacy. There would occasionally be fresh grilled fish, he furiously exhorting us to eat it immediately and not to wait for each other, for the grilled foods should be eaten directly they are cooked. We would stuff ourselves to repletion, glad for once of the lack of women to curtail our gossip and our purely masculine jokes. When we could eat no more, we would stagger up to the salon, throwing ourselves in elegantly on divans and loosening our belts. Our host would turn on the lights in the dome ceiling and draw the curtains against the night. He would feed more logs to the already bright fire in the china stove, and presently the Batman would appear with Turkish coffee to take the taste of grease from our mouths and a choice of cigarettes for the smokers. One of us would start up an old Turkish song, and soon everyone would join in, well content with the world in that coarse atmosphere of unashamed belchings and loosened trousers. Disreputable and unglamorous we might be tonight, but the girls of Askishi here would not know that tomorrow when they met us strutting through the city streets. Sinop, Samsun, Chorshamba, 3 cities on the Black Sea coast, and each of them had bought a plane to be presented to the Air Force. My unit was given the plane which had been subscribed to it by the good citizens of Sinop, and I had the task of flying it there. Samsun and Chorshamba had no aerodrome, so the other 2 planes accompanied me for their different regiments to Sinop, where representatives from Samsun and Charsha would welcome them and name their respective planes. We were to fly over all 3 cities and give an aerial display, then return to spend the night in Sinop. Everything went according to plan. We all 3 flew low over Samsun and Chorshamba, looping and rolling and spinning and diving, and when we got back to Sinop, the aerodrome was crowded with well-wishers. Peasants eager to see the planes up close, school children to shyly present gifts to us, and pompous municipal officials. The governor arrived in his striped morning suit and a tall, shining black hat, and we were quite put to shame by such elegance. The mayor was late for the ceremonial welcome, and the governor showed signs of irritation. We all stood without waiting. We 3 pilots in Sinop, and yet not in Sinop if you can follow my meaning, For until the mayor made us welcome, we could not strictly be regarded as being there at all. Presently, a knowledgeable man in the crowd shouted that the tardy mayor was sighted, and we all looked in the direction in which he pointed, and we saw a very old donkey carrying a very small man coming down the hill. The governor made noises in his throat. "That is the mayor," he said bitterly, for he had been educated in Europe and knew what was what. Many of the happy people surged to meet the donkey and its precious cargo. The donkey suddenly began to trot briskly and reached the aerodrome at a terrific speed. The mayor alighted from its back stiffly and welcomed us so affably and with so much enthusiasm that there was no longer in doubt in anybody's mind as to whether we were in Sinop or not in Sinop. When I returned to Eskişehir, I discovered that Muazzez was temporarily installed in the house, her husband being in Rome on duty. The house had become like a private hospital, with my mother in bed with one of her innumerable headaches, and my sister complaining of pains in the most unlikely spots. My grandmother and my Batman ran the menagerie, one as autocratic as the other, and both of them driving the hired servant into constant outbreaks of semi-hysteria. Once long ago, a faraway Hajar had to put up with similar treatment. One morning a doctor was called to the house, and I was telephoned at the aerodrome, the doctor testily telling me that both my patients were to go to the hospital. Muazzez, he said, needed an immediate operation. My mother, though, was, in his opinion, a very obstinate woman indeed. She refused to listen to any suggestion of hospitals. He ended by saying that furthermore all her teeth had to be removed. When I arrived home, there was bedlam in the house, with my sister having the most terrible premonitions of her death and begging my grandmother to look after her baby for her. My mother was sitting up in her bed crying and declaring that never, never would she go to a hospital, and neither would her teeth be removed. This was the direst blow for her, that her strong, white, even teeth should be removed. We managed to calm her and told her that they would probably never have to come out anyway. Muazzez was our most immediate problem, and we had her rushed to hospital, where she was operated on with astounding success to recover with remarkable speed. She returned to my home for convalescence, cried constantly for her husband and her child, and wrote reams of letters daily to all her friends recounting with the most horrific details her operation. Dislike sprang up between us. It was she who eventually persuaded my mother to have her teeth removed, and when in the course of time my mother received her new ones, my grandmother examined them with great suspicion, then handed them back, saying piously that, thank God, she did not have to wear them. This caused my mother to cry and declare she would rather be dead than put such monstrous things in her mouth. Maliciously, my grandmother encouraged this attitude. One evening, however, I lost my temper to such an extent that my mother nervously promised to do whatever she had to do with the confounded teeth if only I would quieten down before the neighbours came in to investigate possible murder. Not very long after this, I was walking home one sunny afternoon from the aerodrome when I saw 2 fighter planes taking off from the field. They were flying very close to each other, and I stood and watched them for a few moments, mentally criticising them. They started to attack each other in a mock battle, and they flew under and over each other, and they flew just that much too close. I walked on towards the town, remembering the crazy things we had done too when we had first become pilots. When I reached the centre of the city, I became aware that the sound of the engines up above me had ceased, and I turned my face skywards and hundreds of pieces of plane were hurtling down. I remembered their dangerous, too close flying and thought that I should have known that this would happen. I hurried on towards home, for I suddenly became sure that my mother had witnessed or heard of the accident, and I desperately wanted to reassure her that I was all right. The streets had become crowded with people, with the wives and the children and the mothers of the airmen. Their faces were white and frightened looking, all of them wondering if it was their turn to become widows, orphans, or the mothers of the dead. An ambulance tore by, clanging with feverish urgency, and I had a fleeting thought that if one pilot who had jumped by parachute was not already dead, he was most certainly would be by the time that jolting ambulance had got him to the hospital over these uneven roads. The pale, trembling wives and mothers rushed on me like an army of mad things, begging me to tell them the names of the pilots who had crashed, and I replied that I did not know. But they held tightly to me, crying into my face that I did know, that I must know who was on duty. Still I said I did not know, and they wailed that I would not tell them, beating my arms with their soft, impotent fists, begging that one question over and over again. Please, they said, please, Lieutenant, tell us the names, please, please, please. I tore myself out of their grasp, and their tormented cries pierced my ears all down the crowded street. Suddenly my mother, running on bare feet, and for an incredible, unbelievable moment, I was a child again, and our house was burning, and I saw her running thus down the desolate garden on her bare feet. She was only partially dressed, having run out in the middle of changing, and my Batman was running after her with a cloak in his hand. I was numbed with shock and felt coldness creep all over my body. When she saw me, she stood still, and the Batman caught up with her and threw the protective cloak over her white shoulders. I cannot forget her eyes, those wandering eyes that told their own story. Only we were still too blind to read their message correctly, even though fear stirred somewhere, warning. We none of us knew then the madness that would one day leap out at us, when all the bottled thoughts and memories of a quarter of a century would darken the overtired brain, dim the bright, mournful eyes. Take that uniform off, she said to me, her voice so low and hoarse that involuntarily I backed away from her. You will send me to my death, she said. You will make me lose my mind. Her voice died away in a great, strangled sob, and she half closed into my Batman's arms. He picked her up as if she were a baby and carried her home through the oblivious streets, and I walked beside him. My mind was numb and cold and drained of all thought, and I could only see before me, imprinted forever on the summer air, the gentle madness that had looked out of her eyes.